compound. Okay, so I want you to look at these 4 sentences that I'm going to put up here right now. Okay, and I'm going to disappear for 30 to 60 seconds. Not a long time, but just to catch everybody up on what we did last week. 4 sentences here, and if you can tell me, all you need to do is tell me, are they simple sentences or are they compound sentences? Okay, and please put your answers in the chat, and then we'll go over them together. Okay, so a quick minute, simple or compound. Okay, go to it, and I'm just going to move out of the way here so you guys can see the whole sentence. All right. All right, everybody. Good. You guys work fast. So lots of answers coming in on the chat. All right, so let's go over them together. All right, and then we'll get into some new stuff today. All right, so looking through the chat, lots of stuff coming in. We've got Jasmine says, looks like that she thinks the first sentence is a compound sentence. So she passed the exam, but she did not complete the final assignment. So that's absolutely right. If you said compound sentence, that is correct. So number 1 is compound, and here's why. Let me just quickly tell you why. You've got she is the subject, and past is your verb there, so you've got a full clause. And then here you've got she, again, the subject, and complete is your verb. All right, so you've got 2 clauses there connected with the comma and the conjunction but. And this is exactly what we talked about last week. This is great, where you've got 2 independent clauses connected with the conjunction, your fanboys from last week, and that comma, that's a compound sentence. Perfect. All right. Number 2, looking for a couple more here. John's back. All right, good to see you, John. And he says that number 2 is a simple sentence, and he is correct. Awesome. Okay, so it's simple because, as we said last week, a simple sentence has 1 subject, 1 verb, and 1 idea, basically, right? I mean, there are some exceptions to that, which I'll talk about in a minute. All right. Now, as I mentioned last week, simple sentences don't always have simple ideas in them. They're not always super short. Here we've got a phrase in there, but that doesn't change the sentence at all. It's still a simple sentence. Good. Okay. Also, again, if you guys have questions about anything that I'm saying while we're talking about it, put it in the chat and we'll get to it. Okay. So number 3, we said. Let me see another answer here. All right. Kara, does she have an answer there? Oh, I missed it. Okay, somebody's saying that number 3 is a compound sentence. Now, I think I'm trying to kind of trick you here for number 3. I knew that some would say that it's a compound sentence, but it's actually a simple sentence. Sometimes I like to trick my students a little bit, but here's why. Okay, so airlines is your subject. Okay, you've got continue as a verb. Now you do have reduce. That is a verb. That's true. So it's got 2 verbs in this sentence, but only 1 subject there. Okay, because of airlines, the only subject that's a simple sentence. And both of those verbs go back to that one subject. Okay, so don't be fooled sometimes by the word and there. Okay, I know that sometimes we said that we use and to connect the ideas, but there always has to be a subject after and for it to be a compound sentence. Okay, look at number one, for example, just to clarify. Number one, you'll notice that we said that we've got but there, right? But you notice that there's a comma before but because of the subject after but. Okay, you get the subject after but, and you get the comma before it. In number three, there's no subject, so there's no comma, and it's a simple sentence. Okay. Got a question coming in from Veronica. Says, because PH in second part, there is no subject. I think that's exactly what she's talking about. For number three, yeah, there's no subject in the second part, so that there's no, it's a simple sentence. Exactly. Good. Okay, what about number four? He missed the shot. The game was over. I think most of you saw that as a compound sentence, and you're correct. Again, you've got the subject and verb there. And let me move over a little bit to the side. All right. You got the subject and the verb here, and that means it is a compound sentence. Now, I'm just going to pop out here just so you can see the full screen. I'm going to disappear. Okay. So you've got the full sentence there. The first part, you've got one clause there with a subject and a verb. That's independent. All right. And then the second part, the game was over. That's an independent clause too, with the semicolon in the middle. That is definitely a compound sentence. Good. Okay, so let's talk about that number four for a second. Let's really talk about that semicolon there, and something that I mentioned last week about having choices. So here, let me pop back in. All right, I'm back. So you've got two different things going on in this screen. He missed the shot, the game was over. He missed the shot, the game was over. It's the same, basically the same thing, but the difference is you've got here semicolon, and here you've got the period. Now, oftentimes students ask, what is the main difference between these two things? And really, when it comes to meaning, the meaning is exactly the same. Nothing is different at all between the first one and the second one. Really, the only difference is the first one is one compound sentence, and the second one is two simple sentences, and that's it. Okay, so it's kind of your choice. It's a style choice, really, if you decide to connect your sentences and make one compound or leave them separate and have two simple sentences. All right, so you definitely have options, and as I said last week, you want to vary the type of sentences you're using. You want to switch it up and have some short sentences, long sentences, and that kind of thing. Okay, so just to clarify, just so we're all on the same page before we get into the complex sentences, one more that we saw last week, an example of a compound sentence. Jamie is happy with her IELTS score overall. However, she was hoping to get better results on her writing. So subject and verb, good. Subject verb here, okay. And then you've got, however, the adverb in the middle, kind of connecting the two to make a compound sentence. Watch a little magic trick. There. Okay, so the thing that's changed is the semicolon becomes a period, you capitalize the H, and now you have a new sentence, but the meaning is the same. So again, you've got one compound sentence here, or two simple sentences here. It's entirely up to you whether you do one or the other. Okay? So, there we go. That's the two examples together, exactly the same meaning. But let's talk about complex sentences. Okay, complex sentences is the third that we're going to be looking at. Sometimes it's the one that causes the most confusion with students, but it's quite simple. All right. Complex sentences. What is a complex sentence? A complex sentence must have at least two clauses. Okay, so it can't be a simple sentence. It has to have two clauses at least or more. And here's the difference. So compound sentences also have at least two clauses. However, in a complex sentence, you have one independent clause, which sometimes we call the main clause, and you have at least one dependent clause. Okay, so you can have more than one, but you have to have only one independent clause. Now, I'm throwing a lot of kind of technical words out there. I mean, don't worry too much about the terminology as long as you understand how to use the sentences and how to properly punctuate, then you'll be fine. Okay, I'm sure a lot of native speakers have no idea what an independent clause is, but so don't worry about that too much. All right, let's look at an example to try to really understand what I'm talking about here. Okay, so the example is, the student did poorly on the exam because he misunderstood the essay question. Unfortunate. Yeah, we've all been there perhaps. So this is a complex sentence. All right, why is it a complex sentence? You've got a subject and a verb, and you've got another subject and another verb here. Okay, so you definitely have two clauses going on here. This is what we call the independent clause, or the main clause. All right, the student did poorly on the exam. And this is your dependent clause, okay? Because he misunderstood the essay question. Now let's break it down, a little reminder of last week, and talk about what is the difference. Okay, so the first part, the student did poorly on the exam. That's an independent clause because all I need to do is pop a little period there, and you've got a complete independent sentence. Okay, independent clause, complete sentence. It can stand alone, and you can walk away, and you're done. Okay, the student did poorly on the exam. Finished. That's fine. So that makes it the independent clause. What you can also do here is we'll take away the next part. Look at the next clause. Because he misunderstood the essay question. This is your dependent clause. Okay, why is it dependent? Because. All right, because I see here that, again, John is putting it up here. He says, because makes the difference. And that's exactly what we're looking at. In this sentence, or in this clause rather, the conjunction because creates a dependent idea. And here's why. Because it's incomplete, okay? And again, I'm not talking about spoken English. If you're speaking to your friend and your friend says, why didn't you come to the party? And you say, because I was tired, that's fine. There's no problem with that at all, okay? This is entirely written English. You cannot just say because he misunderstood the essay question, because it is incomplete, it's dependent, and it needs that main clause in order to be completed, in order to make sense, okay? So that's the complex sentence. That's basically the idea there. Okay, so let's look at a couple more examples and kind of the structure of the complex sentence, and then I'm going to get you guys to do some work. Okay, you guys are going to do some work for me. So first and foremost, I should move a little bit here. Oh no, I'm good. This is perfect. Okay. Here is a list of very common conjunctions that we use to create dependent clauses. Just like you'll see because is on there, but really common ones like although, lots of time expressions like when or while or until, reason result kind of things like what we said because, right? As or since. All right, this is a good list of words to memorize, and actually if our friendly moderator Lane can put the notes in the chat, I'll just pop out here for a second and just show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to make sure that he puts this in the chat so that everyone can follow the link. This is something that we looked at last week, but I actually added some notes to it. So if you scroll down to the second page, you'll see I've given you a pretty good list of words that you can use to create complex sentences. Okay, so that's going to be in the chat. Let's go back into the notes here. Okay, so you're going to use all of those what we call subordinating conjunctions. I need to scroll down a little bit here. Okay. Scrolling down. Where's my list? There we go. Okay. So we got this list of subordinating conjunctions. Again, don't worry too much about that term, subordinating conjunction. These are just your linking words that create dependent clauses. All right. And with the complex sentences, it's important to know you've got two options for the structure, okay? Option A is your independent clause first, then your dependent clause. Option B is your dependent clause, and then, as you can see kind of behind me, your independent clause, okay? These are interchangeable and the meaning is exactly the same. Really the only difference that you have to be careful of is the comma, and that's where students kind of make mistakes frequently, okay? You have to be careful of that comma. If you begin the complex sentence with the dependent clause, it has to be followed by the comma. All right, so let's look at some examples here. And then again, I'm going to get you guys to do some work for me. So the first example rather, he's afraid of small spaces because he had a traumatic experience as a child. And the other one, because he had a traumatic experience as a child, he's afraid of small spaces. It's the same thing, just flipped. Okay, so there's your dependent clause at the second clause, and you notice that there is no comma before because here. Okay, you don't want to put a comma there. Don't need to. Because of because. In the next sentence, you've got because at the beginning. Your dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence. You've got your conjunction there, and therefore you'll see that I am using the comma because of because, right? So again, if you start with that one of those conjunctions, you want to put the comma after the first clause there. Okay, let me show you one other example, and then it's your turn to work. Okay, so some young people have difficulty handling new responsibility when they first move out of their parents' home. Again, you've got your dependent clause there. When is your conjunction that creates the dependent clause. Therefore, no comma. In the second example, I'm starting with when. I'm starting with the dependent clause. Therefore, comma. It's just that simple. If you follow that structure, you'll be okay. All right, so before we continue, I should mention also another form of complex sentence that we're not going to talk about today because it's the type of thing that really needs at least one lesson all to itself, is this sentence here. The man who I had never met before was looking at me strangely. In this case, who I had never met before is a dependent clause, and this is a complex sentence. You've got who there, that relative pronoun. This is what we call a relative clause or an adjective clause, but we're not going to talk about that today. All right, that's for another lesson. Yeah, I look forward to it. So this is what I'd like to do. I want to look at the difference between compound and complex sentences.